Now, the government's flagship Rwanda bill is delayed yet again after it suffered more defeats and votes in the House of Lords last night. Former Tory party leader Sir Ian Duncan-Smith has accused the government of using soft tactics and failing to get the legislation passed, which is interesting because other people are criticising the government for not allowing some of these amendments, which even some Tories agree with. Well, joining me right now to discuss this is Rupert Lowe. He's a former MEP and spokesman for the Reform UK party. Good morning to you, Rupert.
Morning, Julia.
Thanks for joining us. What do you make of unelected, unaccountable peers being able to defy the will of the House of Commons yet again in this never-ending game of ping-pong that's going on in the Houses of Parliament to delay the Rwanda bill once more?
Well, I think the House of Lords is in danger of signing its own death warrant if it isn't careful at some stage. It is, as you say, the unelected chamber. It's full of cronies who have been put there by various prime ministers like Blair and Cameron. A lot of them aren't fit for purpose, and they're making a hell of a meal out of this. I mean, some of the reasons they were giving, I think the Afghan issue may have some merit, but frankly, Rwanda has been safe for a long time. It's a perfectly well-run country. I mean, Paul Kagame has done a fantastic job there, and to use that as a reason for filibustering and trying to stop what ultimately is now a national emergency taking place. Most of the British public now consider this an emergency. Yeah. I think Rwanda itself is a red herring because it's not going to solve the number of people who are coming into the country illegally. And I think it's actually indicative of the sort of lack of effectiveness of our parliament now and the way in which they are run effectively.
We can't really get anything done. But going back to a couple of those key amendments, I mean, there have been a number of amendments that have been tabled back and forth between MPs and peers. And number 10 would clearly say, look, we don't want to have, we're not going to give an inch because we know you'll take a mile. But as you say, an amendment to make sure that people who've served the British Armed Forces or helped with the British Armed Forces, like translators from Afghanistan, not be included among those sent to Rwanda. I mean, seems reasonable to me, although I wonder if we'd suddenly see human rights organisations, lawyers claiming that everybody who might be deported probably worked as a translator for British forces in Afghanistan at some point. But also the declaration of how safe Rwanda is. Now, the proposal is that there is an independent body that agrees that Rwanda is a safe place for these people to be deported to. Not just to have their, as you remember, it's not just about having their asylum claims decided. That's where they stay if they are granted asylum under this system. Well, in that case, I mean, we know that, OK, I believe that Rwanda's a safe place now. It hasn't always been a safe place. It might not be so in the future. Is it unreasonable for there to be an independent body decides this? Or is your concern that the sort of people appointed to this sort of a body are exactly the sort of people who'll say, oh, no, it's not safe because one bloke had something bad happen to him once?
Well, I think Rwanda's arguably safer than London these days, Julia. I mean, Paul, there were some terrible things happened there, as you probably know. The Tutsis and the Hutus and the Tutsis, I think they were. There was huge sort of a genocide took place. But Paul Kagame, as I said, has actually built it. He comes in for criticism because he is quite strong. His civil service is very effective. A lot of them cycle to work. They've turned down a lot of foreign aid. They've actually done the things that you need to do to turn a country into a proud, functioning place. And, I've got lots of my friends who've been to Rwanda. It is a safe country. That is, in my view...
That's for you, that's not an issue. Do you think, actually, what this is, again, by the Lords, and again, it's not just Labour and Lib Dems and crossbench peers, some Tories as well. We've got also, some former, Supreme Court judges and others, that actually this is just about stopping this from happening. They don't believe this should be happening at all. They don't believe we should be offshoring this issue. And actually, an awful lot of these people, it would appear, whenever I've questioned them, they don't seem to think it's actually a big issue. Apparently, if there is an issue, it can be solved by someone having a nice fireside chat with Emmanuel Macron, presumably Keir Starmer, if and when he becomes Prime Minister, and then the problem's over. I mean, they're going to find it a bit of a shock, aren't they, when they get into office and discover that being a bit nicey-nicey with Emmanuel Macron isn't going to deal with this problem?
Well, I think a lot of the legal problems, Julia, come from the fact that we were being groomed to become part of the European Union. And Tony Blair, embedded the Human Rights Act and the ECHR into our law. Europe is a rules-based system. We're not. We tend to be based on common law. So we were being groomed, for membership of the EU. Part of that, obviously, was devolution, which has been a disaster.
We've been a member of the
Scotland
EU
now,
since the 1970s.
It all goes back to this. So Blair and Brown and Liz Truss was complaining about it, but the fact is the Tories have been in power long enough to have been able to repeal all of the nonsense that we actually ended up having to put up with through, as I say, the Human Rights Act being embedded. It was the Constitutional Reform Act in 2005.
But a lot of this, though, is about the interpretation.
All this has been basically embedded into a British law, and we've got far too many laws which now need to be repealed. I think Lord Sumption made some very good points this morning, and quite rightly, Liz Truss was complaining about it, but she shouldn't be complaining. She's correct, but they could have repealed a lot of the issues. So look, this is indicative of how ineffective our government's become. The British people consider this to be now an emergency. And if it's an emergency, Julia, trust me, they could find, if they had the will, the way to deal with this. They easily could, but they don't have the will. They don't want to be seen to be doing something
Why don't you think they have the will? Because we've seen Suella Braverman basically ousted as Home Secretary because she wanted, leave the European Court of Human Rights.
She warned it wouldn't work, Julia. She was right. She could see, so could Robert Jenrick. They could both see that it wasn't going to work. And at the end of the day, what needed to happen is we need to leave the ECHR, and we need to basically get rid of all these embedded, human rights acts into our legal system. We need to return more power to our sovereign parliament. And ultimately, we need to do what we should have done when the British people voted for Brexit, and that is to take back control of our own country. The problem is that, as we saw, the Tory wets blocked what the British people wanted. They filibustered and messed around. We haven't repealed the laws. We haven't had Brexit yet. And as a result of that, we're powerless to take control of our own destiny. And that's why Reform has come up with some common sense policies to actually govern Britain in a basic common sense way, which is in the interests of the British people. And we're not seeing that. That's part of the problem here. This is, you drive up and down the country. I was in Yorkshire yesterday. The country's packed. It's being overbuilt. It's got far too many people here. Most of our government departments don't know how many people are here.
That is true. I'm always absolutely fascinated by this, that we don't keep, especially when you have to fill out so much information to get in and out of countries, and they've got no idea who's here, how many people have overstayed. I certainly, there's pretty good evidence.
No idea, Julia. They lost
17,500 people who are here illegally.
And they said they admitted we don't know where they are. Well,
no,
it's hopeless.
Yeah, I know, absolutely. It is quite ridiculous. Well, we shall see how this pans out. I'm fascinated to get people's views on this. Lots of people getting in touch. 0344 499 1000. Text on 87222, or get in touch on X at TalkTV. Your reaction to this Rwanda bill. But Rupert, I also want to ask you about another story, front page of the Times today. I'm sure you've seen this as well. Tory MP Mark Menzies. He was, until last night, the Tory MP for Fylde in Lancashire, and was a government trade envoy. Now he's lost the whip. He's under investigation by the party currently, but I imagine eventually it'll be by the police, although he's denied all these allegations, I must stress, over that allegations that he misused campaign funds and abused his position. This after an allegation that party apparently been aware of since January, that he made a 3 a.m. phone call to a 78-year-old former campaign manager saying he'd been locked up in a flat by what he called bad people, and they were demanding £5,000 for his release. That later became £6,500. That money was paid by his then constituency office manager in the morning, and he was able to get out of this flat. He then claimed that he would need another £35,000 for medical bills, apparently repeatedly, according to this report, repeatedly having money from campaign funds, which were not then paid back to the campaign funds. Complete misuse of campaign funds. If that is the case, that is a criminal act. What do you make of this story? Bearing in mind, he does deny all the allegations.
Well, it comes shortly after the William Ragg situation, where, Mr. Ragg was vice chairman of the 1922 committee and on another ethics committee. The entire Tory hierarchy stood behind him, and then 24 hours later, he was gone. I don't know, you're, I think, younger than me, Julia, but I remember when the Tories, last time they got absolutely exhausted under John Major, there was a man called Stephen Milligan, who almost,
Yes.
rather like this chap Mingies appears to be doing. And again, we can't judge him, but I think he has now lost the whip until this is all sorted out. But Milligan died with an amyl nitrate orange in his mouth, a ligature around his neck, in a pair of women's underwear. And he was, if you like, the epitome of how rotten the Tories had become under John Major. They should never have won that 92 election. And I think we're there now. You know, the Tories have been in power for too long. They have.
Well, how does
as I
being
say,
in power too long mean that things like this happen? There's a litany. We've seen, half a dozen plus MPs who've had to resign.
Cameron Osborne hollowed out the House of Commons. They've not got very good people in the House of Commons. As a result, we don't have good ministers.
So here's the question for you.
We're seeing exhaustion.
Rupert, here's the question for you. Look, Reform UK, you've only got one MP currently. That's Lee Anderson, who's defected from the Tory party. However, you bid to have, like many, many more. You know as well as I do the exposés day after day in the newspapers and online of various reform candidates, whether they're in local elections or whether they're standing in constituency seats or local, or at any level, being exposed for either horrific, racist tweets, very dodgy links with dodgy people and the like, maybe bad people, I don't know, like this Tory MP. You've seen loads of your candidates being exposed and having to stand down and being deselected. This happens to every party. The only reason you haven't got MPs who've been forced to stand down is you haven't got more than one MP yet.
Well, it does, Julia, but the Tory party has been part of the two-party system for a very long time. I mean, I think the Labour Party was the last party to come to break through and replace the Whigs. But at the end of the day, yes, a young party like us operating with a very, very small team, we are getting bigger. The vetting is getting better. But we are trying to
people's tweets would work.
We are trying to give the British people a common sense option for better government. Yeah. And I think you're never going to find any party that's perfect. Look at Angela Rayner and the sort of nonsense that's clearly been going on with her tax affairs, and quite why Keir Starmer doesn't want to look at the legal advice she had, I don't know. Yes. But look, it happens everywhere. I accept the fact, it probably will happen. It happened with UKIP. It will happen with Reform. Not that I was involved in UKIP, but I think you're quite right. It happens everywhere. But
okay, we'll have to leave it there.
Actually these are elected Tory MPs who are supposed to be responsible people. Okay. Ours are prospective parliamentary candidates. Who
want to have that role. I'm not sure there's any difference there. Rupert, I'm going to have to leave it there. Former MEP, also Reform UK spokesman there. Claire Pistol is still with me. I might just point out Mark Menzies is still an MP, is sitting as an independent now. He has denied the claims in the reports. Just want to stress that, that he asked party members for money and then repaid them using campaign funds. He has denied that.